Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Thursday's edition. And as always, we're broadcasting from Southern California and Long Island, New York. Jeffrey, welcome back to the show. Happy to have your opinions here today.
Happy to be here, especially because my neighbor's houses all blew down last week.
And your Mets swept the Yankees, so you got to be pretty happy.
Well, yeah, but then they taken today off and they're playing two more tomorrow, I think, starting Friday.
Well, it's a good start. Anyhow, listen, let's hit the big news of the day. The economic news came out. The economy declined 0.9% in the second quarter. That followed a 1.5% decline in the first quarter. Two consecutive quarters typically ushers in a recession or calls that the country's in a recession. But share with our audience a little bit, the Biden administration is sort of not really saying that the country's in a recession. Noted economists, there are people saying the country is. There's some very well-respected ones saying not so fast. Jeffrey, what are the Democrats doing with the wordsmithing and the...
I think it has something to do with the fact that it's only about 100 days to the midterms.
Really?
They're trying to make themselves look better. It's as simple as that. I mean, I've been hearing real weird ones. I mean, for example, yesterday they were talking about a recession is 2 quarters of contraction, but also a cow has to run up to the top of the Empire State Building.
The argument is, if you're creating 300 to 350,000 jobs a month, there's no way an economy can be in recession. Other people are saying, well, Americans built up their savings so much during the pandemic that it's not really going to affect them. Maybe that's true, but I will share one thing, and this is crystal clear to all our viewers and listeners. You may not feel a recession if you're in the upper middle class or you're pretty wealthy. If you're in lower wage earners and lower middle class income earners, you are still feeling the effects of this recession. And what was the old saying they used to say, Jeffrey? A recession is when your neighbor...
A depression is when your friend is out of work, and a depression is when you're out of work.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, what's your take? I mean, you think it's purely political that the Biden administration is trying to do everything they can, working with the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party, which is the media, trying to spin this thing?
But yes, I do. But I think what they're doing is, once again, they're ignoring the people. Because, like you said, the middle class and the lower incomes, they don't care what you call it. They just know they can't buy as much stuff now as they could a year ago.
Right.
And that's really, they don't care. You can call it the moon. They don't care.
Yeah.
I know I always say this, but they care about having food on the table, educating their kids, and buying enough gas they can get to work.
Yeah,
and that they can't do.
Yeah, it's a problem for sure. I mean, look, some of the things that economists are talking about, the job gains which we've had, that is impressive. They're talking
sort of, but it's just people returning to work after the pandemic.
Yeah, and interesting thing about this, we'll call it likely recession, slowdown, economic growth, however you want to call it. Some sectors, Jeffrey, are being affected more than others. I mean, if you're in the travel industry, the hotel industry, the dining, eating out, your business is booming right now. If you're in e-commerce sales, home construction, selling real estate, not so much. So it's sort of really uneven out there.
Yes, and I think part of that is you couldn't eat out for a year and a half.
Yeah.
You couldn't go to a hotel for a year and a half. And it's like you're waiting and assume you can now.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of that, in terms of construction, I think part of it is that housing is tough because the the inflation, not only because of inflation, but because the interest rates have gone up. I think that's part of it. And just the cost of goods. I have a friend who is redoing his house, He does stuff by himself, which I don't understand. But he bought plywood for his house, and he says it's doubled in cost since I started.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. We have a paradox going on here, though, Jeffrey, because while the Fed raised the overnight borrowing cost, the Fed funds rate 75 basis points, it's now in a range of 2.25 to 2.5. Short-term notes, 2-year notes, are actually 20 basis points higher than 10-year notes. And folks, I'm not trying to get too much in the weeds, but when a 2-year note yields more than a 10-year note, the expectation is somewhere, over the next 6 to 9 months, what the market is telling you is economic softness is ahead, and that's why there's an inverted yield curve right now. So,
and if you remember, a year and a half ago, the same thing happened, and people were going, "Oh my, we're going to have a recession," and it was only for 2 days.
Yeah, it was a short time there.
But now it's more long term.
An interesting thing also, despite the fact that the Fed is raising these interest rates, and I happen to agree with their actions, so I'm not going to criticize them. The Federal Reserve has a $9 trillion balance sheet. Folks, let me explain to you how it got there. Before COVID hit, first quarter of 2020, that balance sheet was about $3 trillion. Effectively, what the Fed went out and did is they bought $6 trillion worth of government notes, bonds, mortgage-backed securities, etc. So they effectively added $6 trillion of cash into the economy. So that's how their balance sheet got up to $9 trillion.
I want to say something you never hear from me. It's not Biden's fault. It started under the Trump administration.
Understood, but at the time, when you actually shut down an economy, you had to do something or the country would have gone into depression.
Absolutely.
I don't fault what happened prior to that. But when the Fed did that, they took their balance sheet up $9 trillion. They announced that they were going to start letting some of the securities that mature or run off. That means when they get paid off, they're not going to buy them back. That balance sheet's only gone down by $16 billion through the month of June. That's a small number. When you have $9 trillion worth of a balance sheet, and you only take it down a tiny fraction, I understand why they did it, and they were transparent about it, as the Fed is. So first thing they do, they raise the rates. Now the likelihood is, Jeffrey, I think between now and the end of the year, you're probably going to get another 75 to 100 basis points total. The betting on Wall Street right now is that in September, they'll probably raise 50 basis points, and then maybe another 25 to 50 after that to end the year at a Fed funds rate somewhere around, we'll call it 3 to 3.25%. That is a big gain from where we were at 0 to 25, and rightly so. However, what the Fed has to look for now, we have to see how these inflation figures come out, how the economic growth figures, the job figures, to see if this medicine is working.
It has to. The whole reason for it is to reduce inflation. It's putting your foot in the brakes,
slowing down demand.
Yeah, and they have to see what happens with this before they start. But the real problem is they should have been doing this a year ago.
Oh, well, of course they should. There's no question about it. But at least, we can't say, well, he should have, would have done it. What they're doing right now, Jeffrey, if you look at the stock market over the past 2 days, up big. Now, again, we've seen this movie before, bear market rallies, but you are seeing the market accept this, and it's had a pretty big run here for 2 days. Now, of course, after the market closes today, Apple and Amazon report. Those are 2 reports that are going to be closely scrutinized by Wall Street to see, how that's playing out.
I don't think it's going to last long.
Yeah?
I think all this bad news they knew about.
Yes.
It's already built into the cost.
Yeah.
And I think when the next inflation report comes out, when the next new unemployment numbers come out, every week, it's Wednesdays.
Mm-hmm.
I think when that comes out and it's not what they think, I think it's going to go down again.
It'll be closely followed. So,
Absolutely.
and let's talk about an
Even just the one thing,
Yeah.
the 0.9, the administration was saying that it was going to go up 0.5. It was going to go up 0.5.
Yeah.
So really, they missed it by almost a point and a half.
Yeah, and a lot of that is being attributed to an inventory build that took place, and you're seeing evidence of it from Walmart to Target to all these e-commerce businesses. They actually have too much, quote, stuff, and the inventory wasn't properly managed. So we'll see if that carries over into Q3. But, again, there's a lot of more question marks than there are answers right now. We're just going to have to follow it closely as we go.
And you got to look at August, because August is all the back to school spending.
That's true.
And at least for the retail stocks, they better get a lot of it. It's the second biggest period of the year next to October through December.
Right.
Because, these kids want presents.
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
Let's move over to some policy changes that actually legislation that could possibly happen. Joe Manchin surprised the Washington intelligentsia, if we call it, by coming around. Folks, he didn't support a Build Back Better bill. Thank goodness for his actions there. But the revised version of Build Back Better that they're calling the Inflation Reduction Act.
That's like calling me the hairy guy.
Yeah, I mean, this is insane. The Democrats are used to lying to their base. I mean, they just lie to them constantly. This is another example of it. This new bill, folks, let me describe it to you. When Biden and Schumer and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and all those radicals tried to push Build Back Better on us, that was a $3.2 trillion monstrosity. All kind of horrific stuff in that bill. Manchin and Sinema made sure it never saw the light of day. Okay, so now Joe's been negotiating with Schumer for quite a while, and they've come up with this. Now, let me tell you what's in it. They want to install a 15% minimum corporate tax rate. Okay. They want to close something called some loopholes of carried interest. I'm not going to get into that. It's pretty complicated. It'll raise some money. They want to spend some money over 10 years on things like electric vehicle tax credits, spending money on pollution controls, on climate initiatives. They want to sort of make a cost of people that emit methane, high cost of that. Folks, methane is
We're going to get rid of cows.
Yeah, methane is way, way, way more worse than the atmosphere than CO2, by like 50 times. I wasn't aware of that, but it is. And
that's just for my brother.
They also want to, and Manchin, I assume got this in there, reform some of the environmental rules and regulations to allow it to be easier to do domestic drilling. Well, I'm thinking that was probably Manchin's price to support this bill.
Well, that and the fact that there's a pipeline now through West Virginia.
Yes, there is.
I don't know why they picked that place, but
Well, here's the interesting thing about this. Again, these are highlights. We haven't actually seen the actual bill. But the government, now get a load of this. The government is projected that it's going to generate, make sure my figures are right here. It's like 753 billion of revenue over 10 years from the increased taxes. They're going to spend on this bill about $450 billion. So average American might think, okay, well, wait a minute. We're taking in $750. We're going to spend $450. That's going to be done over 10 years. So at the end of the day, the government's going to not only pay for this by $300 billion, which is basically $30 billion a year. So you might think, okay, well, what about it? Well, I don't know. We still have to see the bill. But Jeffrey, I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever seen a spending bill that closes the gap and actually reduces the deficit.
Never.
That's my
And
point.
I haven't seen it yet, but I don't know if the spending is over 10 years.
Yeah,
Which means
yeah, it is.
it is.
Supposedly, I haven't seen the bill, but
But
supposedly.
the recovery of while we were recovering that income, we're paying higher interest rates on the $7 trillion on the seven. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
and that's going to increase it.
yeah. Look, just specific to this bill, it's hard for me to imagine that Democrats are going to be happy about a bill that increases or decreases regulations so we can drill for more oil, gas, and coal here in this country. I get the part they're trying to do about credits for EV. There's $60 billion in this bill to help minorities who have lived in pollution-prone areas. Okay, I get that. Again, this is a 700-page bill, 700 pages. And Jeffrey, every time I hear a 700-page bill, and again, folks, to put this in perspective, this is dramatically tinier than what they originally proposed. So those are some of the components in the bill.
But like you said, it's a 700-page bill, which means there's going to be a lot of stuff in there that you don't know about.
That's right.
I remember when Obamacare came out, and it was 1,200 pages, and I read through it, and I kept pointing out to my congressman, this is in there. You're going to lose coverage. And there'd always be something like, Jeff Dunitz is a liar. And I was right. Look at page 76. They don't know what's in it because they're not going to read it.
Well, the question is right now, okay, they got Manchin on board, but now the question is, what's Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona? What is she going to do? Bear in mind, Jeffrey, she in the past has opposed any changes to the tax on carried interest. She has opposed raising corporate taxes. Now, the Democrats are spinning this, saying, no, this only applies to corporations that don't pay any tax. They got to pay at least 15%. Typically, what happens when a business has higher taxes? They either pass along that cost to the consumer, or B, they let people go because they can't afford as many employees, which causes unemployment rate to tick up. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what she's going to do. But again, I got my correct figures here. $739 billion in revenue, $433 billion in spending over 10 years. And the Democrats and all the climate activists, they're going, oh, Joe Manchin, great. Well, I'm not ready to pile on Manchin yet. I'd like to see the details of this thing, but if you had...
also, he's been in a contracting, like a vice, because he's under so much pressure.
He comes across to me as a guy that handles it pretty well. I don't think he's going to cave.
Handling it for a long time.
Yeah, again, let's see how this thing really... Let's get the details of this, and we can discuss it a little next week. But the preliminary stuff that they're discussing, I'm looking at this saying, wait a second. In the big picture of things, and again, folks, I'm not trying to downplay money Washington-wise, but to spend that amount of money over a 10-year period, I'm sorry, it's just not what it used to be. And if regulations are going to be loosened, I have a hard time believing that, but if it's true, I don't know. I mean, it will be interesting to see if they get Sinema's support.
Let me make an interesting prediction.
Okay.
You're not going to vote on this until 101 days from now, because the whole purpose of this is, again, to try. This one is trying to rally their own people before the midterms, and I guarantee you, just like that chip bill. They promised the Republicans they wouldn't do what they did,
right?
And then they did it. I have a feeling that after Election Day, they're going to find that there are problems with this, so they can't vote on it.
Well, the only thing I'm going to pour cold water on is this. Schumer is going to try to fast track the bill. First thing he's got to get is the approval of the Senate parliamentarian to be able to use the reconciliation process for this bill. If he doesn't get that, this bill goes nowhere. If he gets through the Senate parliamentarian, then they're going to have to win over Kyrsten Sinema. Now, she may support it, she may not, who knows? But without her support, the bill will die. So Schumer has said he's going to fast track it. Their goal, Jeffrey, is to get this in front of the parliamentarian, I think, maybe next week or the week after, and then as soon as the parliamentarian rules on it, the Senate will vote on it. Now, are they
going to do it if it originates from the Senate because it's a money bill?
Sure.
It doesnn't have to.
Oh, the House will have to approve it. Okay.
But doesn't it have to come from the House first?
No. No. They can craft the bill, pass it, send it to the House. The House could then either pass it or modify it. If they modify it, it's got to be reconciled in conference. And then, look, they have the votes to pass this if Sinema goes along. So.
And Queen Pelosi, they'll do whatever she says.
Her members will do pretty much whatever she says. Yeah, those people in the House are like, you think there's a thing called a moderate Democrat, a radical Democrat? They're all radical Democrats in the House. They're
Pelosi Democrats.
Yeah, exactly. Some of them may claim they're moderate, maybe they are, but the way they vote liberal every time. So anyhow, let's talk about this though. You did mention the CHIPS bill. That bill passed the Senate. Now it's got to go to the House. How are Democrats in the House, Jeffrey, going to react to subsidies for semiconductor chip makers that are already profitable? How is that going to sit in the craw of Democrats?
Chip manufacturers who are already making billions of dollars?
Some are, some not. But the whole idea on this is and it's a national security issue. Let's call it what it is.
Absolutely.
Most of our chips come from Asia. And a great deal of them come from Taiwan, through Taiwan Semiconductor, or they're manufactured in China. That's an untenable situation to be in, which is why, frankly, the government's going to help subsidize some of these chip manufacturing businesses here in the United States. There's already ground being broken in Arizona and in Ohio. So, look, I think this is probably a good bill. I mean, we want semiconductors manufactured in the U.S. The bill got all the Democrats and 17 Republican senators to support it. My only question is, are all these radicals in the House going to support giving, benefits to corporations? They campaign no, but maybe we're in a situation where they're going to say national security overrides their philosophical beliefs.
I have something interesting that happened. You know how last week we were talking about Pelosi's husband buying all this chip money because this bill was going to. This morning, after it was passed, he sold his chip stock.
Yeah, I heard that. Did he? I actually heard he sold at a small loss. So I don't know. And of course,
insider trading is very hard to prove.
Yeah, it's hard to prove, but again,
but this smells.
Oh, it has that. When Pelosi's the Speaker of the House, and he's doing this, and the guy's coming off a DUI. I mean, she ought to put the husband in the. In the refrigerator and just say, go away for a while.
Maybe he can do some Paulie Bear like they had Billy Bear.
Yeah, I remember that. Hey, listen, one other thing on this climate thing. These climate activists and these radicals here in the U.S. are pushing, oh, great, we got some climate spending. We're going to spend, $10 billion a year on climate, this, that. Jeffrey, there are currently around the globe 200 coal-fired power plants being built. And they're being built predominantly in Asia, but now they're also starting to move to Africa. Look, one country is not going to solve the issue of increased methane and CO2 into the atmosphere. And all it's going to do, I mean, frankly, I hear people say, well, the United States has to take the lead. What good does it do for us to take the lead if 20 coal-fired plants and no telling how much methane is being emitted, so that some of these countries in Asia and Africa can increase their economic standards?
And nobody talks about the fact that man, dog, pig, our former vice president has a lot of investments in that industry, in the reducing carbon emissions industry.
Oh, you're talking about Al Gore?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Well, in South Park, he's called Man Dog Pig because he's creating a character. So no one talks about that, and that's why he's pushing it so much. The other thing, and I know we disagree with this, but there's still people think there is, and I'm not saying it's not happening, but people think that it's been proven that the temperatures are rising. And they think so, and they're telling so because it's been proven by computer models. Okay. For all these years, do you remember what used to be called, what do you call it? Global warming. And now it's climate change.
Right.
The reason why they changed it because they asked for it to be measured by the satellites, not the ground data. But when they measured it by satellites, for the last 17 years, it hasn't gone up.
Okay.
Okay. So when you look out the window, instead of using a computer, it's not getting warmer.
Well, it's a debatable subject, but one thing it's crystal clear that's happening is the climate radicals, the cultists in the United States, they're making their voice heard, and they did get some benefit from this bill. Who knows if it's enough? I have no idea because we still have to see.
The other thing is, I know, and my wife wants me to turn down the air conditioning, climate reasons, but other than that, there's no warming, at least in my humble opinion.
You might be right. I don't know. I'm not going to commentate it one way or another because the planet's always either warming or cooling. It's been doing it for billions of years. So, anyhow, let me ask you this. I'll shift away from the climate stuff because we'll see if that bill ever makes it through the parliamentarian and through Kirsten Sinema. What'd you make of Biden's offer with the Russians to? I think he's going to do a prisoner swap where he offered a Russian arms dealer, to get basketball player Brittany Griner back and businessman, I think his name is Chris Whalen. He's a businessman that was abducted in Russia, trumped up charges. So 2 Americans held in Russia. Anything going to come out of that, Jeffrey? And the silence from Moscow has been deafening.
The guy that is being broadcast as an arms dealer is also a terrorist. He actually bragged about the fact that bin Laden was the biggest terrorist in the world, that he was number 2.
And he's sitting in an American prison right now.
And he's sitting in American prison, and we're going to let him out. Just like most DAs in America.
He's acting like liberal district attorneys.
But no, there are other people the trades for.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's all I'm saying.
I don't know.
It's not my family that's out there, and I desperately would want them back.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I think the Biden administration is making a noble effort here, given the issues with the Russian-Ukraine war. Look, Anthony Blinken, our Secretary of State, hasn't even talked to Sergei Lavrov, his counterpart in Russia, since March. Apparently, they're going to have a discussion next week. Look, anytime.
But you remember when Obama traded 5.
Oh God, I don't even. That was
5
horrific.
generals, right?
Yeah,
and they all worked. They all ended up leading people, the Taliban, against us.
Yeah. No, I know it for Bo Bergdahl. I remember that one. Look. In this case, I think you've got trumped up charges against 2 Americans.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know. I would think the American public will probably overwhelmingly support this. You can say Brittany Griner, the basketball player, didn't use her head. Maybe not. I mean, who in the right mind would bring hashish to an airport?
I'm not disagreeing with you at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's beyond stupid.
I just think they could have negotiated better.
Probably. We'll see. This will be a story that'll be on the news over the weekend, and we're going.
Like I said, if it was my family,
yeah, you want to do everything.
I'd say give him $1 trillion. I want my family home.
Of course you would. That's why I'm not going to politicize this issue. I hope he's successful bringing those 2 Americans back, because although I think Griner used really poor judgment. Do I think her intent was to smuggle drugs? Absolutely not. So, and the businessman that's being held there, that's just outright criminal. He did nothing wrong. So, yeah, well, hopefully something good, can come out of that. Jeffrey, we talk about it all the time on Thursdays. Got a couple minutes left. Now that you've seen this play out here, we saw the interest rates rise. We've seen the GDP numbers. We've seen inflation. Gas prices have come down considerably. But is there anything in your mind that would affect the midterms coming up between now and when people vote in October, November?
I think it depends on the candidate. Like Herschel Walker. He's a lousy campaigner.
He needs to up his game for sure.
He was an aggressive running back.
Right.
He's got to be a better, more aggressive campaigner. And, you look at why Hillary lost. Hillary lost because she was a lousy campaigner, that she couldn't associate with the people. And a lot of the Republicans that are in trouble. But then again, in some Michigan House races, the Democrats are actually looking at the most right-wing person and funding their campaigns because they think they're going to be easier.
That tends to backfire. I will share that with you. As to Warnock and Herschel Walker, Warnock's up in early polling in Georgia. He's up 3. On the other side of the ledger, Brian Kemp, the current governor's up 5 on Stacey Abrams. What it's telling me on these earlier polls is that the voters of Georgia, again, this is real early. We've got 100 days till the election. But the Georgia voters are giving a thumbs up to both Senator Warnock and Governor Kemp. And hopefully that will change, at least in the Walker race. I still view the situation, Jeffrey, as the Senate could go either way. Could be +1 or +2D, could be +1, +2R. I believe that Republicans will take the House of Representatives. I don't think it's going to be the gigantic blowout that people are talking about. I think they're going to pick up I think the average midterm is 30 seats. My guess is we'll pick up 20, 25 seats. And we'll gain control of the House of Representatives. The Senate, like I said, it could go either way. This idea that there's going to be blowouts on both sides, I think that only happens if something really craters in the economy between now and Election Day.
Or like Obamacare, when everybody hated it and Obama didn't help anybody.
Yeah, or if there's an October surprise, like the DOJ does something related to Trump. I mean,
by the way, if Abrams loses, then does she have 2 elections not to admit she lost?
That's a good one. Yeah, well, we'll see. Look, again, things are what I say to American people, things are fluid right now.
Absolutely.
And don't take anything for granted. I mean, listen, we have to campaign hard. We have to have good candidates. You're spot on the good candidate piece, and they have to have good policies. Now, look, there's not a lot of Republicans can do in the House and the Senate right now. When the Democrats have control, you do what you can, but there's not a lot. Look, once these elections are over in November, if the House flips, whether the Senate does or not, the dynamics in Washington will change. And,
yes.
And maybe a more centrist approach will happen.
I just hope that when it changes, that they don't start acting stupid and doing things like let's impeach Biden.
No, we don't want that. No, that's.
I'm saying I don't want that.
No, I don't want it either. Look, if there's been areas that need oversight, great. But to go through the crap they put Trump through, I don't want that. No good.
It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money.
And it divides the country.
And it divides the country, exactly.
Yeah, we want to do it. If you have a Democratic president, a Republican House, whichever way the Senate goes, you maybe we'll get to where 60% of this country is, which is either center left or center right. That is a positive note. I'll close it out with that, Jeffrey. Thank you for your comments today. Always appreciated. And as always, we will cut through all the propaganda, folks, and we'll give you the straight story. Jeffrey, thanks again. See you next week.
See you next week.
All right, folks, that's it for today and this week. A lot of great topics. Fun time every day doing the show. Thanks for viewing and listening. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.